Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollands High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Good evening everyone. In the last tutorial we went ahead and created our basic animation so we can move left and right, and we did some jumping. And we have our wall collision. In this tutorial we're going to go over setting up a more robust animation and some better controls on our walking and jumping sequences. If you have not yet created an animation for your character, don't worry, I went ahead and did that for you. You'll find a link in the description that will let you download the PNG file that we're going to be using for the video. It's going to look like this. And this is our character animation. So I have several pieces here and I have them labeled so you know what they do. So this group here, this idle animation is 60 frames. It's these two rows. Doesn't look like he's doing much, but it's sort of like he's breathing. And then down here we have a crouch animation. So from standing, we kind of crouch. We can run that in reverse to get him to stand up. I have a jumping animation. So if you're standing, there is a jump kind of sequence. That's about 15 frames. And I have the frame sizes here, if you need them. Then I have a walk start animation. This is so when you're in idle, you can transition to a walk cycle, and then once your first foot hits, it will smoothly transition to a continuous cycle that will run. Both of those are 30 frames. And then I have an attack. So later on we get into setting up basic attacks. We'll have a standing attack, so we're like swinging a sword. And then we have a crouching attack, swing the sword. And then we also have a jumping attack, swing the sword. Now the standing and the crouching attacks, those are 30 frames, but the frame spacing is a little bit wider to accommodate the arm moving out. On the walking animations, there's less of a gap because there's not much really going on with the distance of the player from one frame to the next. But when you do the punch, this punch here will come off the frame. So there's extra spacing here, a little bit more padding. Just a thing to keep in mind when you're setting up your sprite sheets. And then down here we have our lonely little wall grab animation, just so that we can grab and cling onto the walls if we fall or something like that. Okay, this is going to be in the link in the description, so feel free to download that and use it along with this tutorial. And let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and close this window here. I'm going to go over to our sprites. I'm going to open up our player. And you can see we have our left, right, basic images that we created before, but now we're going to load in from the sprite sheet. So go ahead and double click and open up your sprite player idle left animation. And I'm going to go to the edit button. And then inside of the sprite animation window, go to images and then come down to import strip image. This will let you load in individual frames off of a sprite sheet. I'm going to grab my side scroller demo character PNG file. When you load in your sprite sheet, it's going to take a second. This is a pretty big sheet. GameMaker has a size limit. This is pretty close to the limit here, just because I do have these descriptions here. But once it's loaded in, we need to set up what images we want to load. So this is going to be our sprite idle to the left. And I'm going to do my number of frames. So my idle animation, if we hold down control here and kind of zoom in with the scroll wheel, my idle animation is 60 frames. And you can notice that he is facing to the right, so he's not really facing the correct way. That means we're going to have to flip the animation. So the first question we have here is number of frames. So I have a total of 60 frames. I'll type in 60. And then it says how many frames per row. Well, you can see we have 2 rows, and I have a total of 60 frames. Well, I don't have 60 frames all the way in one row because I have 2 rows, and that's, so 60 divided by 2 would be 30. So let's go ahead and put 30 in there. And then down here where it says frame width and height, well, I happen to include that here. So my frame width and height is 180 by 428. So 180. If my 8 button will work. And 428. Come here, you. Once you have those in, you can scroll over it, you can see that GameMaker goes ahead and grabs very nicely the frames of your animation. Just go ahead and check, make sure they're neatly organized there. And I'll press the convert button. It's going to ask you, or it's going to give you a warning here letting you know that when you do this, it's going to overwrite what's ever here. I'm just going to say yes, that's fine. There we go. And if I run this, if I hit the play button, you can see a very slow but a breathing animation. I'm going to adjust the speed here. One of the nice things to note about GameMaker 2 is when you adjust the speed on an animation, it remembers that and it actually uses it later on when you run the animation. So I'm going to adjust my speed here to 30 frames, not 300, 30. And you can see him doing sort of a breathing animation, and that's pretty cool. Now he is facing the wrong way, but that's fine. In here, we could go up to Image, go down to Mirror, and then hit All Frames. And now he is facing to the left. Go ahead and open up our sprite idle right. Edit Image. And then we're going to go up to the Image option here and import our strip again. Give it a second to load. Okay. And again, we're going to load in our idle. So it was 60 frames, and that's over 2 rows, so that's 30 frames per row. The frame width was 180. And then 428. This is what happens when mechanical keyboards die, as they start chattering and giving extra keys here. Alright, got my frames grabbed. Need to get a new keyboard. Keep telling myself that. And there we go, so we have the left and right loaded. We do not have to flip these because he's already facing to the right. Go ahead and open up the Sprite Player Walk Left. Edit Image. Go up to the Image tab and down to Import Strip. We'll grab our strip. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this by holding Control and scroll wheel. I'm going to come down to the walk cycle. So we have a walk start animation. That is 30 frames. We're not going to use the walk start in this one. We're just going to use the walk animation by itself. So that's going to be a basic cycle here. That's 30 frames, and that's 180 by 428. So first question is number of frames, so we have 30. Number of frames per row, we have 30, because we only have one row and all of our frames are on the same row. And then we have 180 by 428. And if I scroll over here and up, you'll notice that it's capturing the frames on the top row. Well, we don't want it to capture the top row, we want it to capture down here with our walk cycle. So down here. So the way to get there is we have to do a little bit of math. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces from the top, but we count the first position as 0. So we're actually only 5 spaces from the top. So I'm going to pull up my calculator here, and I know I have a height of 428, so 428. And I just said that I am 6 positions from the top, but the first position is 0, so I'm only going to consider it 5 positions. So multiply that by 5, and that gives me 2140. So if I come down to my vertical pixel offset, so vertical pixel offset, and type in 2140, oop, there we go. It's lined up nicely on our walk cycle. Awesome. And then I will hit convert. Yes. Once again, we're going to have to flip this, so go up to Image, come down to Mirror. In GameMaker, they have Mirror and Flip as two different things. Flip does vertical, and Mirror does horizontal. And while I will use the term interchangeably, in GameMaker they do have a different meaning. So Mirror is what we're going to be using, and then all frames. So now he is walking to the left here. You can go ahead and test run it. So there he is walking. But he's walking kind of slowly, so I'm going to pause that, and then I'm going to hit the speed. I'm going to do 30 frames. And there we go. We have a much faster walking pace. But you can see there's a bit of a hiccup. When we get to this, this last step, there's a bit of a jerk. Whenever you have that jerking motion, it's usually the tail end of the animation looping back. So if you look at our frame 1, and you scroll all the way over to our frame 30, you notice that they're the exact same frame. Okay, so that jerking motion that we're seeing is two of the same frames being displayed, and what that does is it creates an extra moment in time where his foot is out, whereas from here to here there's a subtle transition, right? So that's one frame here and one frame here. There's a difference, but these two frames, frame 1 and frame 30, are the same, so it creates that bit of a delay. To get rid of that, we'll just delete frame 30. So go ahead and select frame 30 and hit delete. Yep, that's fine. And now when we run it, you won't have that pop. Okay, good enough. We'll do that on the sprite player walk to the right. Edit image. Go to image and import strip. Once again, we're going to put in the correct number of frames, so we have 30 frames for a walk, and we have 30 frames on that row. Our row, or our frame width is 180, and our frame height is 428. And then we want our vertical pixel offset, and that was 2140. And then convert. I'm going to set my walk speed to 30 frames, and I will delete the last frame because we do have that pop at the end. So I'll hit pause that, and I'll go all the way to frame 30, and I will delete that last frame. Get rid of that pop. Good enough. Let's jump into player jump left. So edit image. I actually did not mean to pun that one. Most of the time I do, but that time I did not. Alright, for the jump animation, let's go ahead and zoom in here so I can see. Jump animation is 15 frames. Our frame width and height are the same. So let's go ahead and do jump animation, so that's 15 frames. And how many frames on that row? 15. We are 180 by 428. Silly keyboard. There we go. Now we have the same situation here that we had before. We're on the top row, but we want to be on this fourth row. Once again, even though it is 4 rows from the top, the first position is 0. So we are going to do 428 times 3. So you math geniuses out there probably know that already, but 428 times 3 is 1284. So I'm going to come down to my vertical pixel offset, and I'm going to type in 1284. There we go. Hit convert. Yes. And I'll go ahead and give it a quick run. So this is his jumping animation. So there's a bit of a crouch, and then he jumps. And we'll adjust this as we go to smooth it out if we need to. I'm going to make it 30 frames. There we go, a little bit faster. Go up to Image, come down to Mirror, and Mirror All. There we go. So now he's jumping to the left. And this will work in two different ways. So we have the thrust where the character bends and then jumps. So if we come down here, we have the initial bend as the character goes to jump, and we have the push off, and then we have our last few frames here that we can use for the actual jump position in the air. And we also have, if we run this as we land, just the initial frames here, we have the landing. So he hits the ground and then he kind of absorbs or cushions the fall. So if you run this in sequence, you can kind of see that you have the push off and he lands and kind of crouch again, you push off and land and crouch again. So that will work pretty nice. Let's go ahead and load in our jump right, image, strip. So that's 30 frames, or sorry, 15 frames. And then 15 frames on that row. The image is 180 by 428. And then our vertical pixel offset was 1284. Convert. I'll make this 30 frames. And there we go. Awesome. Now that we have that loaded in, you want to save GameMaker because yes, it does crash, so go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and play. Look at that, we have our character, but there's a bit of an issue. I don't know if you can tell, but he's sort of in the ground. But the idle animation is running, you can see him breathing there. A little slow. But if I go to walk, we have the walk. Those seem to work. And if I try to jump, he does attempt to jump with a little bit of a jitter. Let's fix part of our problem here, which is we are in the floor. So let's go take a look at why. So when we load in our images, it changes our border a little bit. Let's open up our room, and we'll take a look at that. You can see as we change that image, its position, because it's drawn from the top, drew it partly into the floor. So we're going to pull him out of the floor just a little bit. And the reason for that is our character is 180, or sorry, our character is 128 wide. If I put him right here on the floor, he is 128 wide. And he's also 256, or a little bit over 256 tall. But the frame itself has some padding, just in case. So if he does some jumping or whatever, there's this extra padding that is here so that the character doesn't clip off the frame. That padding means our actual frame size is a little bit bigger than what we want. So what we're going to have to do is position him where we want him to be. And it's fine if we put him here. That'll work. But if you don't want him to get stuck, you can kind of put him up top. But we'll fix the boundary box in just a minute. I'm going to set him here just so you can see. But that's the reason. The reason is our frame has extra padding on it, so our character's size is naturally a little bit bigger than what it used to be. So there he is. So I can still walk, but I can't go anywhere because I'm actually clipping through the floor as far as the boundary box is concerned. So let's open that up. So I'll go to my player idle left, and first thing I want to do is I want to determine where I want my character to be drawn from. By default, GameMaker draws everything from this top left corner. You can see it actually says right here top left, and that position is 0, 0 set to our origin, so that top corner there. But it's going to make life a little bit simpler if we draw this from the center. So I'm going to do middle center. So you can't see it, but there's actually a crosshair in the middle of our character. Oh, there he is. There it is. So that's where our character is being drawn from. This is going to help in animation where we're determining the left and right sides of our character. It doesn't have to be this way, but I find it's easier to do some math if it's set to the center. And then I'm going to go over to collision mask. And you can see that our collision mask is nicely bound around our character. This is going to be fine for hitting walls and stuff, but it won't work out well for running into enemies or anything like that. So we will end up creating a secondary collision boundary for the head, torso, and our legs for when we're being hit by an enemy. But this should work for our character inside the world. But we need to take note of our position here. Right now it's set to automatic, and our size is 48 pixels left, 128 pixels to the right. So that's our distance here. And then our top is set to 69 pixels down from the top frame. We go ahead and hit this little frame button. That should square up the character so you can see. So we are 69 pixels from the top, so that's where that boundary starts, and 334 pixels at the bottom. So that's from this position here, and this is 334. So that's where our character exists on this frame. We're going to go over to our next idle frame. We want to make sure that our collision boundary does not change between frames. If it does, it's going to mess up the character, and you'll end up clipping through the wall. So if I go over to my idle here, let's go ahead and set this to middle center, and then I'll adjust my mask, and so we're at 51, 131, 69, and 334. You can see that it moves over a little bit, and that can be a problem a little bit later on. For example, if we're facing to the right and we move left, our boundary box will suddenly jump so many pixels to the left, or so many pixels to the right if we move to the right. And we don't want our boundary box to magically move into a wall. So we're going to set this so that it's consistent. I'm going to go back up to my idle here, and that's 48, 128, 69, 334. You can write those down if you like. I'm going to change my mode to manual, and I'll do 48, and then 128, and then 69, 134, and that should be good. I'm not worried about my toe kind of clipping outside of the collision mask. When you're making a game and you're determining your collision boundaries, the player will not care if his toe clips into the wall and doesn't register collision, but he will care if invisible pixels register collision and he gets snagged on something. So less in this case is more, so it's okay that if I have a little bit of space, that's okay. This empty space will cause a problem when we're being hit by an enemy. We don't want this to register, so that's why we're going to create another box for our head. Jump over into our walk left. Now let's set this up to center, and then adjust our collision mask. You can see that this is much bigger than our previous. So let's go ahead and modify this. We'll go to manual, and we'll set this to the same as the other one. So 48, 128, 69, and then our bottom is 335. So our bottom here is 1 pixel deeper into the floor than the others, which would cause us to snag onto the floor. So that's going to be 134, or sorry, 334. Where are you? And like I said, it's okay if parts of the character come out of the boundary box. Again, nobody is going to care if something, let's say our enemy did like a foot sweep, and the foot sweep passed through this part of the foot. As far as the player is concerned, he won't care if that happens. But he will care if, let's say, this boundary box came way out here, and then a character kicked this part of the box, and he's like, hey, that never hit me. He's going to get mad. So the character or the player won't care if it's a little bit of leeway, but he will definitely care if there's a little bit of a snag. So you just want to be aware of that. So 48, and then 334. Okay. And we're going to set that up the same on the other. So walk to the right. This is going to be middle center. Collision boundary will be 48, 128, 69, and then 334. Now our jumping animation is going to be a little bit different. Actually, no, our jumping is going to be fine. It's when we do our crouch that you'll see a big difference, because the boundary box will actually shrink. But on here, okay, middle center, the jumping shouldn't be too big of a deal. I was thinking of the other one. So we'll do 48, 128, 69, and 334. So there we go. You'll see as we cycle through the images here, for our boundary box, our player is moving out of the box a little bit. Again, that's not going to be an issue. It'll become an issue later if we want to be very precise on our collision. So just be aware of that. Let's go to top and then make this middle center. Collision, manual. So 48, 128, 69, and 334. Okay, so we should be able to run it from here. And there's our character. And he does walk. Hits the wall. Yay. He does jump, but you can see that he's being a little bit weird when he jumps. He's kind of like a fish. Whee! Now the 1 foot is off just a tad because the way that he's drawn at a kind of like side 3/4-ish kind of view. So this foot's kind of out and that one's back. If that bugs you, you can shrink the boundary box so that this foot cuts into the floor a little bit and this one touches, you know, whichever. But I'm not going to panic. You can always make your floor look like it's at an angle as well to kind of accommodate that. But this is all we need for a demo. And let's see, if I jump and I hit the ceiling, it does stop me from that. Okay. So let's do a couple things. We have an issue where if we walk and we let go, he just automatically stops. Let's give him so that when he's walking and we let go, he takes a step or two and then kind of slows down. So that'll give us a ramp up and a ramp down kind of effect. Also, if we jump and we push forward, we are messing with physics a little bit. Yeah, we can jump, and we probably shouldn't be able to move magically through the air like that. But if we do move, we should continue moving until we hit the ground. Right? So if I move and let go, you can see that I just stop. Or if I'm walking and I jump, my forward momentum doesn't carry. So we're going to go ahead and add in some momentum, and we'll also fix this little fishy flop that he's doing here. Let's go ahead and close the window, and don't forget to save. We're going to go into the script for our player. So check player input. And we have our condition here. If we're pushing the button, we move left. If we push the button, we move right. Else, if we're not pushing any button, then we just stop. So I'm going to go ahead and change this so that if we take our hand off the button, we will not just stop, we'll slow down. So we'll say if object, buttons are sticking, player dot vx is greater than, we'll check left direction first. We'll say less than 0. It doesn't really matter which order you do it in. I'm just OCD. Since we have left being checked first, it just makes sense to check left. So if our player's velocity is greater than 0, when we're not pushing a button, then our object player velocity x will increment, so plus plus. So if we're already moving to the left and we let go, then our velocity will be less than 0, so like minus 12 or whatever it's going to be, and it will count up to slow us down. Else, if our player's velocity x is greater than 0, that means if we're walking to the right, then our velocity will count down. It'll subtract. So minus, minus. And I just happened to notice something. If you look down here where our animation is, this is one of the things that I really don't like about GameMaker. Not to say bad things about a application that I use, but GameMaker does promote bad programming habits. And that is, right here we have can jump being checked, but it doesn't tell us who owns this variable. Because we're inside a script here, and in a real programming language, any other IDE or integrated developer environment, variables are either global or they're local. They're defined in some way. You don't want to have global variables just floating around because everybody can access it when it shouldn't be accessed. And the parent of this variable, the owner of it, is object player. Yet it's still checking this variable. It really should throw us an error and say, hey, I don't know who this variable belongs to, because it's not in the list here. But GameMaker allows you to get away with some of that stuff, and I find, so they make it so it's easier for the beginner to kind of program. So if they make mistakes, the program will still run and kind of do stuff. But I think that's a really bad way of teaching people. You're much better off having it crash when something is wrong rather than having it run when something is wrong, because if it crashes when something's wrong, it'll at least throw you an error and say, hey, there's something wrong, fix it. And later on, when you're trying to do something, you won't have something hidden in the background causing a problem because it decided to say, oh, we'll run it anyway. So this really should throw an error. It's not, because GameMaker has a lot of safeties to kind of get around some of that stuff. But anyway, we should have this say object player dot can jump. Sorry, a bit of a rant, but you want to make sure you have your variables identified for who they belong to. Because let's say if we were making a another character, right, an enemy character, and we were checking if the enemy's can jump variable was accessible, then whose variable would it be talking to? That's the problem if you have a global that is shared between everybody, because the moment you modify the can jump variable for the player, and it's the same exact variable for something else, and that other creature or whatever has access to that, whenever you hit the spacebar, he jumps too. So it can cause issues later on. Sorry about the rant. Anyway, go ahead and hit the play button. And if I hit the button and let go, you can see that I kind of slow down and take a final step. So that's a little bit nicer. And if I jump, that's working a little bit nicer. I move forward a little bit and I slow down. But we still have an issue that we are slowing down while we're jumping. We shouldn't slow down if nothing is acting on us. Basic Newtonian physics, an object in motion should continue to move until something stops it, right? So we need to tell the system that if we're jumping, then don't slow down our forward momentum. So we'll go back into our else statement here. So else, I'll go ahead and get rid of this part. I'll just name this slow us down if not jumping. So I'll say if object player, and I'll say is jumping. So if the player is jumping, but I really want to check if the player is not jumping. So to say not jumping, I'm going to put an exclamation point in the front of here. So if the player is not jumping, then we can run this code. So let's go ahead and wrap this in some braces here. That way this if statement sees the whole thing. And there we go. So if I jump and I am moving, I should continue forward momentum, and that'll give us that arc. But if I am on the ground, I'm not jumping, it'll just slow us down. Whee! Okay. Now let's fix the wobbly fish thing. So let's go into the player here. So objects, object player. Alright, so in here we have our condition where it says is jumping. So if we're not jumping and we are not falling, we're going to check to see if we can jump, and then we have our scenario. And then the else condition, this is what happens if we are jumping. So if we are jumping, display the left or right jump animation. But we have a lot of frames kind of going on. We don't want the floppy fish thing to happen. We want the jump animation to kind of run until he kicks off, and then we want him to leave the ground. So after this sequence, we're going to set up, we'll say jump after animation is finished. And we'll set up a condition that checks the frames of the animation. So if, we'll do image index is greater than, and we want to pick the frames that you want. So in this case I'll do less than 0, or image, come on you, index is greater than the last frame. So GameMaker can be a little bit weird, and this is another issue that I've noticed with it. Let's open up our animation here. Any jump sequence will work. So we have our images. We have current frame 1 through 15. Now, a thing to know about how images are stored, they're stored in what's called an array. An array is just a variable that has a list of numbers. It's organized from 0 and up. That can be confusing because in GameMaker, I don't know if the developers kind of forgot that or whatnot, but right here it says current frame 1 of 15. And we do have frame 1 through frame 15, that's true, but an array is organized from 0 and up, so frame 1 is really frame 0, and frame 15 is really frame 14, okay? That can get confusing because sometimes GameMaker doesn't know which way it's going to count the array, from 1 or from 0. Half the time it counts from position 0 and up, and half the time it counts from position 1 and up. That's a bug inside the system. I don't know why that happens, but it really should be counting from 0 and up. But with that in mind, we have our first frame, so we have this, and then we want to know how many frames we're going to go to before the jump animation kicks off. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then right about here we have our push off. So our down, and this is our push, push, and then this is where we're going to be lifting off, and then this is where we're in the air. So frame 8 here is the last frame of our sequence before we're in the air. And then we kind of carry through. We have these, and we want this animation to stop when it's kind of at the end. So 1 through 8, that's going to be our kickoff. So it's going to be 0 through 7. So inside of my player here, step event 0 through 7. I'm going to go ahead and put some brackets in here. So if our image is 0 through 7, then we're going to have the jump animation run. And once we leave the ground, we want to have our animation stop. So we're going to say image index is going to be frame, we'll do frame 7. Or we'll do frame, we'll do frame 15. We'll see how that goes. Oh, sorry, kitten. And if I jump, you can see the jump animation happens. He doesn't quite but he's not quite pushing off, right? I'm actually leaving the ground before the final push of that animation can happen. So what we need to do is tell our game to not let him leave the ground until the animation's done. So I'm going to go over into my script here. So check player input. And down here where it says toggle jump button, we have it that when we hit the jump button, we allow the player to accelerate upward. That's what gives us our lift off. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off right here. And I'm going to put this jump speed portion into the player itself. So I'm going to go back into the player. And we're going to go ahead and after this last frame that we're going to run, we're going to then have them accelerate. So since we're inside the player, we don't need to call the player's object. We'll just call its variable. So it's velocity y. It will be equal to a minus move speed. Jump speed, sorry. And since this variable, this number here doesn't exist because it's 0 through 14, I'll just change it to 14. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the spacebar. And you can see that if I hold down spacebar, he does jump, but he does this little jittery thing, right? So what's happening is when we hit the button to jump, it's relying on our key press to count all those frames. It's waiting for those frames to count. So if we hit the button once, nothing happens. It counts like one frame. And if we hit the next, or whatever, it's only going so many. We can see this if we put a debugger on here. So let's go into the player's draw event. So I'll just come over here. I'll add an event so you can see all this stuff. Draw, just a basic draw event. Whenever you modify the draw event of a object, you override its initial draw state. So we're going to say draw debug info. So you have to tell the system to draw the object itself first. So we'll say draw self. If we don't draw self, when we go to run this, our player will be invisible. Now we're going to draw some text. So I'm going to say draw set color. I'll do C underscore yellow. By default, it should be white, I think. But I'm going to change it so it's easy for me to see. And then draw text. And it wants to know the X and Y location of the text. So this is going to be at the player's X location plus some distance. So I'm going to push it off of the player just a little bit. I'll say plus 12. And then the Y location is the player's Y, which should be around the player's middle section. That's going to be fine. And then I'll do the string. So our string value is going to be what we want to see. So I want to see our player's jump frames. So I'm going to say frame, give it a little bit of a space, end quote, and then I'm going to tell it to record. I'm going to tell it to report the frame into as part of our string. So I'm going to say plus string, and I'm going to put the variable image index. And then I'll just go ahead and close that off with a semicolon. Let's go ahead and play that, and you'll see the frames as they're going. So there are frames counting. So right now in idle, it's counting all 60 frames, right? If I jump, you can see it's getting stuck, and then it's waiting. So if I hit the button, sometimes I jump, sometimes I don't, because it's not counting until the button's pressed, and then it loops through. So we're going to have to tell it to where to start. So for example, if I come in here, let's go ahead and add our state as well. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'll do this. I'll push this Y down 12, and I'll have this report what state we're in. So we'll say is jumping. So is jumping. This way you can see that the variable will change when we hit the button. Okay. So what's happening here is we have it checking if we're on if we're on the first frame of the animation, or if we're at the last frame of the animation. So if we're running some other animation at the time that this sprite changes, it's going to check where that animation is and then try to update to it. If it's counting at a position, because these guys count to 60 frames, right? So if it's counting at a position that is greater than frame 7, or at a position that is less than frame 0, then it'll run the jump animation. But these guys are at frame 60 sometimes, so you might be halfway through a walk cycle when you hit your jump. So you could be, at frame 5 or frame 6, which is greater than 0 but less than 7, so it won't count any frames there. So what we need to do is tell it that when we hit the jump button to set our image index back to 0. So to do that, let's go ahead and remove this piece and jump over to our check player input. And then right here where we remove the speed, I'm going to go ahead and just remove that, and I'll change this to image underscore index, and that's going to be 0. So this will guarantee that we start at the first frame that we need to start at. Okay, so now you can kind of see as I hit the button sort of what's happening here. When I hit my spacebar, you can see that I don't actually enter my jump state because of an issue. Our issue is our floor, right? So if I hit the button, you can see he's trying to do the jump, but he can't. The frame's starting to tick. It's being reset to 0. That means that this part here in the code, let me kind of smooth this over, this part here in the code is checking if we can jump, and we hit it, and it is setting this to 0 and starting the frame count over. That part's happening, but we're not leaving the ground. The reason we're not leaving the ground is we're colliding with the ground. We have a condition that says, right here, in our vertical collision, we have a condition that says, if we are jumping, then stop jumping, right? So it's running the animation, it's trying to run the animation to jump, but we're in contact with the ground. While we're in contact with the ground, it turns is jumping off. We can look at that as well in our draw event here. Let's go ahead and grab this. I'll go ahead and move this one down to position 24. I'll just OCD where I put this stuff. And we're going to check to see if we can jump. So we'll say can jump. And this will be 1 or 0 if it's true. So if it's 1, it means we are able to jump. If it's 0, we cannot jump. So, oops, can jump. Let's see what's going on here. Alright, so can jump is 1. That means we are allowed to jump if we hit the jump button. You can see can jump is toggling off. That means when we hit the button, we're supposed to be jumping, so we're not allowed to jump until we hit the ground. But is jumping doesn't get to fire because we're still touching the ground. So we need a condition that says, that checks if we've already jumped. If we haven't jumped, or our animation hasn't finished yet, then we can proceed to the jumping. Now we cannot set up, let's go into our script here, we cannot set up a condition that counts our frames here because the script only runs if we're pushing a button. So this says if we're pushing a button, then this stuff happens. Well, we can't have frames being counted in here because they would only count if the button's being pressed. So we need to set up a variable that checks if we have jumped. So we're going to go back into the player here. In our create event, we're going to add a variable called has jumped. So we'll say has jumped. We'll set that to false, because in the beginning of the situation we have not yet jumped. And then inside of our else here, we have, after the animation is finished, then we're going to jump. So we're going to set this part to has jumped. It's true. And then we want to tell our collision over here that we don't want to cancel anything until our jumping cycle is finished. So inside of here I'll say if has jumped. Go ahead and wrap this. And we'll say if we're trying to jump, then it's going to check to see if we have jumped. If has jumped has occurred, if we are, in other words, if we have already left the ground, then it's okay to set these back to false. So has jumped will be false. And that should get us off the ground. There we go. So you can see that the animation now winds up and we kick off and we do launch. So that part's working. The issue that we have right now though is after we've jumped, we've left the ground, we have two issues. One, if we hit the top of this, we stop animating. And two, we're still flopping like a fish. So if I walk and I hit the button, I can do this jump thing. Cool. But the floppy fish thing is still happening. So we're going to fix the floppy fish. Scroll back up into our else here, and we're going to check after our jumping animation, we're going to stop the character from animating. So we'll say stop animating if jumped. We'll say if has jumped. So if has jumped is true. Then our image index will be whatever frame we're going to represent for our jump. So you can kind of pick one. So this is when we're pushing off and then we're in the air. I'll pick frame 14 or 15. One of those should work. We'll do image index 14. That works. Okay. Let's see what happens when we hit the top. Boop. So if we hit the top of the ceiling, it sets us back to idle. The other thing is if we walk off the platform, we are kind of walking still. So we don't want to have a scenario where we're Wile E. Coyote and just kind of walking in midair. So we want our jump animation, or our jump pose, to happen if we're falling as well. So we'll go ahead and right here where it says if has jumped, and we'll do or is falling. So if we have jumped or we are falling, then, or our jump animation. So there's that. So the is falling part's not working just yet. Let's see what happens if we hit the ceiling. Okay. So we need to change a condition that also checks if we're falling and what to do for that. Let's go back into the player. What we have happening here is if we scroll up, we have the section where it says if we are not jumping, then if we're pushing left or right, we're going to do the animation to walk left and right. But we also want to check to see if we're falling as well. So I'm going to say if we are not jumping and we are not falling, then this part can happen. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's hit the wall. So if I hit the roof, that works. I'm technically falling at that point. But we don't have a condition for when we step off of a wall because we can still walk. So we're going to have to add that to our next component. So we have this else here. So this else now represents a condition that occurs if we are jumping or we are falling. So if we scroll back down into here, we need to set up a condition that only checks this part if we are indeed jumping or falling. So ahead of this, we're going to say if not jumping. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. Since we can be falling if we're in this condition, it's going to check if we are not jumping and our intention is to jump, then we're going to do this. So the way to check if our intention is to jump is to check if has jumped is currently not happening. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll say if has jumped so we'll say not. So if we are not jumped, and go ahead and wrap that. I'll move this over. So let's see what we've got. Not quite what we're going for. We're back to bunny hopping. So the issue that we just had here, I'll go back. I set this to jumping. This should be falling. That should be falling. There we go. Okay, so we still have that. That works. And then we have... Oh, I ended up jumping off of there. Pink. Oh, that shouldn't be able to happen. Right? It should register that I'm falling and not let me jump there. Another thing we can tackle later. Let's see. So when I step off, it should register that I'm falling. It doesn't. And then when I jump, it's a bit of a delay before I jump. I want to be able to jump a little bit quicker. As you can see, I'm sliding and like just jumps weird. So I'm going to move my frames just a tad. Let's move this. Let's take a look here. So here I'm standing. Let's move to where I'm already crouched. It looks like frame 3. So we'll say for around frame 3, and I want to when I'm leaving the ground. We'll do frame 11. See how that looks. So between frames 3 and frame 11. Okay, so I am jumping a little bit faster, but I'm not seeing the transition. The reason I'm not seeing that transition is if I come back here, I'm going to take my has jumped and I'm going to have it run some frames for me. I'm going to say image index is greater than or equal to 11. So what this will do is once we've jumped, because it's going to start off at 0, it's going to start counting to frame 11, and then it'll run this animation, right? Well, but this will happen if we're at frame 3 or if we're at frame 11, right? So what we're going to do is while we're in here, it's going to count up to frame 11, and then it'll drop us to our last frame. Alright, so let's tell this to stop animating. We'll drop the animation speed to 0. So image speed, we'll set that to 0. Alright, so it worked for one cycle, but it didn't go back. The reason it doesn't go back is our image speed is still 0. So we'll have to set that back. So up inside of here, that checks where if we're falling or if we're not jumping or falling. We'll just have set animation speed. So image speed will be 1. Not 11. That's too fast. This way it'll set our animation speed back once it's set. Okay, so we have that transition. Seems like it's happening a little bit too quickly. But if we are going to jump and we hit the wall, boop, it'll drop us into our falling. Okay. Alright, scroll back down. And let's change this here from an or to an and. We really could start this, we could just say if we're at frame 3, but we don't want it to be a condition where it jumped over frame 3. We do want it to be in between this space. Let's see how that goes. Ah, nicer. But I'm not landing. I didn't actually get off the ground there. this should be greater than 3, because we're starting at 0 and we're counting up. So once it's above 3, but it is still less than 11. This is what you would call a logic error, an error in logic. The game runs, but my brain doesn't. Let's see. Ah, there we go. Yay! So there's a little bit of a flex, then a push. And if I'm up on here, and I hit the wall, boop, I'm already dropping. Okay. So that part works. We still need to have where we step off the platform and we fall. Let's see what we can do about that. OCD. Let's scroll down here, and we have our vertical collision where he says if we are hitting, or if we hit the wall but we're not jumping, then we are falling. But what about a condition that says if we are not hitting the wall? Alright, so what I can do is I can put an else in here. So if we are hitting if we have a vertical collision, then we're not going to be jumping. Is falling is true. So this is whenever we step off of the wall, we would no longer be colliding vertically, and therefore we would be falling. So I'm walking and I'm falling. Hey. Okay, so we have those transitions happening, and we can walk and we can jump. Awesome, awesome. In the next video, we'll go over how to set up the crouching animation, and I will see you guys next time.